I'm Mary Rowe, and welcome to episode 3 of the Ottawa Sessions. Conversations with bold locals determined to make a real difference to their city's future and our country's capital. My colleagues at the Canadian Urban Institute and I met with many of them as we researched A Living Capital, our just released report and action plan to revitalize the downtown core. During our time there, I walked up and down Bank Street because main streets are my thing. How you learn about a city is you walk the spines, and I did that. And Bank Street is the north-south main street that connects many of Ottawa's well-defined neighborhoods, including the Glebe. A few steps west of Bank Street, I came across a cafe called Arlington 5, which, when I saw it and went inside, realized that there was a community behind those doors that were finding something special in their Main Street business. And as you know, CUI is devoted to the future of Main Streets and how they continue to evolve and support small and medium enterprises and communities that surround them. Come join me with the owner-operator as we talk at the back table.
My name is Jessie Duffy, and you're in Arlington 5 in Centertown, Ottawa.
And what is Arlington 5?
What is Arlington 5? Excellent question. Most people know us as a coffee shop, but most people who know us well know that we're a little bit more than that. So we like to think of ourselves as a coffee house with community vibes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I've told you the story. I was here living here for a few months, and I had come from Toronto, and it was the dead of winter, and I didn't find it that easy to be here. I found it it was literally cold, but also I just didn't find things too inviting. And then I found this place.
Nice.
And I took one look at it outside, and then I walked in and I thought, this makes life worth living. I can associate myself somehow knowing that you were here.
Well, it's nice to hear.
Yeah.
And I do hear that frequently, where people, especially people who are new to Ottawa or just finding their footing here, once they find this place, they feel a little more connected and a little more rooted and grounded in the neighborhood. Where other places, I think there's a coolness to them. It's transactional. It's not a place that I think has the same kind of vibrancy that we're really trying to foster here, which we do with hospitality. To me, it's always been about hospitality first, everything else a very close second, but the hospitality is the invitation to come in, to belong, to be a part of it, to be more than just what you're ordering. You're not an oat milk latte, you're Mary. So that's why we always get people's names. You know, you're more than what the product is that you're consuming.
But you also seem to remember that I have an oat milk latte, which is part of
that too.
The
that's
attention.
Also part of hospitality.
That's right, the attention to detail and this kind of level of memory that you have about people and who. So let's talk a little bit about community and community vibes. When you said coolness, I just want to say I'm of an age where coolness used to be a good thing.
yeah, I guess.
But when you're using that word, you're saying more distant, antiseptic, not as warm and friendly.
Yeah. I think opening this place, which came after opening the restaurant beside us, a breakfast restaurant, and a lifetime of working in restaurants, what I saw in cafes was what I like to call like auto-bot baristas, where there's just no warmth, there's no connection. It's just getting through a transaction, and this place to me was sort of the answer to that, of how can we integrate the hospitality that we know and love in a city like Ottawa that exists in spades in the restaurant industry into a cafe environment.
Oh, that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the organic nature of this, because I know a little bit about your history. As you say, we are located 35 feet from a main street, from Bank Street. So you're on a little side street, but on the corner is a restaurant. And just talk to us, and I've been interested to watch this. How do these main street businesses sort of bubble up, emerge, and then they grow? And part of what you and I want to talk about, I think, a little bit is how do we continue to attach to these kinds of locations? So talk to me about the history of your history here and the history of that corner place.
Sure. So the corner, so Bank Street in Arlington, and like you said, the Bank Street being the main street, Ada's Diner was a diner that existed for close to 3 decades. Greasy Spoon, run by Ada and her husband Wilf, who reluctantly retired when we took over the restaurant when Ada was in her early 70s, and I think Wolf was about to turn 90. So this place was very anchored in the neighborhood, and I used to live on James Street, and I would come into that little greasy spoon and have a cheap breakfast, and I would chat with Ada, who would remember my order, even though I only came maybe once a month.
Wasn't an oat milk latte back then.
Wasn't an oat milk latte kind of place. You could probably get an instant coffee if you wanted. Excuse me. But I think what she and Wolf had established there was a neighborhood spot. So when we came in, I came in with two partners, both of whom I worked with at Fraser Cafe, which is a long-standing chef-run restaurant in Ottawa that works really closely with the local food system, with local farms. But years after I had left Fraser's, my future business partner approached me about taking over Ada's Diner.
Okay.
And revamping it, I think more from an internal aspect of like, let's take the approach of chef-run restaurants and apply that to this brunch restaurant. Let's source local, let's make everything from scratch. But what we were very clear on is we didn't want to lose the same level of hospitality that Ada had established. So knowing everyone in the neighborhood, everyone that came in felt like that was their place. So we kept that going because that's, I think, always been my sort of approach to hospitality. So it became, I think, an acceptable evolution of what had been created there. And then, after, we were there a year, and we were wildly busy, which was amazing. So we had lineups, people waiting for brunch, because brunch is the new religion. And we would send people away. We'd get their phone number, say, we'll text you when your table is ready, so you don't have to wait in a line for a couple hours. And they would ask, inevitably, well, where do we go? So we'd say, you could go into the Glebe, you could shop around there. But there was nothing really here to explore. We were sending people to Starbucks, which just felt like, it's just sort of, you fall off the cliff of the kind of experience we're trying to cultivate, and then you send someone to the Autobot Barista venue where it's then this space, which is, like you said, just tucked behind on Arlington Avenue, is sitting empty, and I was looking at it with my landlord and starting to dream, and he said to me, you know what you should do here? You should open a Cinnabon. And I said, that's a wonderful idea, Lada, but I have a different idea. So we came up with this.
Did he own it then?
Yes,
And what had it been? What had this spot been?
It had been many different things. It was a bike shop at one point. It was a record store at one point. It was a punk venue in the 90s, and that's really, the influence of that short-lived time is still living and breathing in these walls and in the punk scene in Ottawa, so that was very cool. But we just kind of wanted to sort of close that loop of having a space that is built on connections with local food, because that's part of community as well, and hospitality, and then bring that to this cafe space, which we did, and we're here 10 years later.
It's interesting to me how much this is about connection. You have proximity. You're adjacent to the space. I've been here when people have been waiting for their table over there, and they get their coffee. They sit outside. It's just like a little circular system going on. Here. And you have all this beautiful food product, and it is made where? It
is made here.
It is made literally here?
Well, for the longest time, it was literally made in this tiny space on that teeny tiny prep table. Every piece of pastry was made here. Every shred of cheese for our breakfast sandwiches was grated here. But we have since expanded, and we've leased the space beside the diner, which is
right
facing Bank Street. So part of this same special little corner. So we'll have a storefront that is opening imminently called Take 5, so a little convenience store with community vibes, which is the front for a bigger production kitchen. So we actually have space to do this thing that we've been doing for
and all of it is
10
within
years.
a pretty short distance. Like if there's proximity matters here.
Proximity
you can
matters.
walk. You can literally push a trolley.
Well, whenever a new staff member starts at A5, we do a little corner tour, and I take them to the diner and and tell them the story. And I always refer to them as our borrow a cup of sugar neighbors, because we just go back and forth. And whenever, you're out of toilet paper, or they need a latte to keep going on a busy day, or they've got extra home fries, it just goes back and forth. So I used to be an owner of that space, and then one of the first staff members, Scott Mosey, that I'd hired, I think it was in the first year, he has since taken over ownership. So now he owns that place with one of the local farmers in Walker. So it's all stayed very connected. So I always say we're kind of like a married couple that live in separate houses. But it's, the connectivity is everything, really. It's
now this is made possible because you have an amenable landlord.
Definitely. The landlord
and
is key.
Part of the challenge we see on main streets generally is if you have secure tenancy, you can do these kinds of things. You can grow, and I'm going to add a second business, and I'm going to get another cup of sugar business next to me, and then we're going to sort of create this ecosystem. But it's dependent on who owns the building, right?
Yes.
So what is the difference about your landlord? Why is your landlord amenable to this and not saying, I'm going to sell and let a condo go up?
Yeah, it's a lot of, I always refer to him as a unicorn.
Okay.
I have lots of friends that are in the industry, have owned restaurants, and I've just heard absolute horror stories, especially during the pandemic, of landlords just being brutally unfair to their tenants and making it impossible for them to run a business. But Lada is very different. I've never heard of anyone else like him. And the way that he sees it, and he said this to me very early on, that this is a partnership. Like, my success is also his success. So if we're in here and doing good business, then he is also doing good business. So we're really good friends, which I don't think that's a common thing that you hear.
Yeah.
Every year I do my annual check-in with him where I say, when are you going to sell this corner to a developer for millions and millions of dollars? And usually there was maybe one time where he hesitated, but most of the time he says, are you kidding me? Do we want more condos like this? He believes in small business too. And that's where I think that's the disconnect with so many other landlords is I don't know if they believe in small business. I think they just believe in profit. Because if they believed in small business, then I think we'd see a lot more of this sort of relationship happen between tenants and landlords, where they work with us if we need help, if I need some time to get back on my feet, if we've had a slow month. It's partnership first. We work together. So
is it hard to keep staff?
It's not.
It's not
Not here at all.
Because
I have the opposite challenge.
People want to work here.
I have a lineup of people that want to work here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that's
a nice problem to have.
It is a nice problem to have, because I've heard, again, the opposite from many other people, especially my restaurant pals who can't keep kitchen staff.
Yeah.
I think the appeal of this place, and I've heard this from people who want to work here, people that have worked here for a long time, is that it is more than a coffee shop. Especially these younger generations, the Zs and the millennials, I think they're working in a place that reflects their values is really important. So I tend to get a lot of people who want to work here because they share the ethos of community building, and progressive establishment.
It's not without challenge, though. I mean, when I first met you, I had come in here, my first visit here, and I had seen a sign in the window.
Yes.
Which indicated to me that you were taking a position on the war in the Middle East. And I remember thinking, I wonder how that works when you've got a diverse clientele, and how do you navigate that? And this is 3 months ago. And I wrote you on your website, and then you saw me here and said, and explained to me. So tell me how you navigate conflict. Community involves conflict too. So that was a great way of putting it. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I'm still navigating that, I think. That, the war in the Middle East, especially has been a challenge to navigate from a small business perspective. We have, I'd say we're a space that believes in advocacy. Especially like during the pandemic, we were part of this really big program called Cooking for a Cause, which was spearheaded by Parkdale Food Center, which is a very innovative community food center, modeled after the community food center spaces.
Yeah.
And we turned into this hub of producing food for folks that were accessing harm reduction services across the city. So
when was this?
This was right when COVID first hit.
So during the pandemic,
yeah,
you had to pivot.
That was our pivot. I didn't, it's really kind of speaks to how I do business. I'm a bit too heart first and a little less head. So we went full throttle into this, this sort of not-for-profit social enterprise approach. Because I was willing to experiment at that time, and I wanted to do something that I felt was going to have a direct benefit to what was happening around us, because people were already struggling, and then
were you shut right down?
We shut right down.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were making around 75 meals a day.
Wow.
And
so you went
them.
from coffee shop to food provider.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, we became social workers, and it was a very powerful time, but super healing for everyone that was here and part of that, because so many people were isolated at that time, and it gave the community that was coming into this space every day, most of them volunteers, a sense of purpose and a sense of community and connectivity. So for us, the work was so healing, and that really sort of established who we were and who we are.
It's interesting.
In that time.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, right around that same time, the Black Lives Matter movement was at the forefront, and some of these murals are a direct sort of illustration of those times. Like the pink flamingos on the side of the building are part of the Pink Flamingo project that came out of Calgary, I believe, that was about the Black Lives Matter movement. So, and we were not necessarily vocal, because I'm not great at social media, so I've been kind of I'm limited in that space. But as a space in and of itself, we stood for these things. We stood as a space for human rights, environmental rights. So that becoming such a big part of our identity is obviously carried forward. And then we were in the red zone when the convoy was here.
Right.
Which was another very pivotal time for us.
Right.
We were shutting down what felt like every other week because of a COVID scare before the convoy showed up.
Explain to listeners what the red zone was.
So the red zone was the area in the core that was marked off by the police that you had to go through checkpoints to enter or exit. So a lot of my staff live in Centertown, so they were walking to work in this very dystopian, eerie environment. It was February too, so it was cold, it was strange. But I live in Vanier, so I was driving into work every day, going through a checkpoint and leaving a checkpoint to get to work.
Surreal, huh?
Yeah, very surreal. And I'd put it to my staff early on and said, how safe do you guys feel about being open? Because, I was hearing from other local businesses that their staff were being harassed. They were being spat on if they were seen wearing a mask. And we kept our masks on way longer than most people did, because we had a lot of people in our community that were immunocompromised. And again, we're trying to be a space that holds space for as many people as we possibly can, which is very challenging.
Right.
And I felt from that moment with us, because we just opened the space for a little bit of sit-in at that point too, that it became, I don't know, I feel like we almost kind of fully actualized in that time, because we'd sort of taken a stand of like, we're here for our community. And people came and appreciated that. And we've been just kind of soaring ever since. And it's just been getting better and better.
So this is a good segue to the street, because of course the convoy was about people coming and occupying a street.
Yeah.
What are you seeing as the changes on Main Street now? I mean, you've operated Main Street business for 20 years, pretty much.
Well, I'm 10 years on this Main Street,
right?
Which lots of changes. I mean, from a business standpoint, there was far less vibrancy. You know, there were far less businesses around. There was Bank Street's an odd one, where it just like you step under the overpass of the highway into the glebe, and you've got multitude of small businesses, and it's got much more of a character. Where this side, I feel like was long in sort of an identity crisis, but that has shifted. You know, Mushu across the street, and Flora Hall, and City Goose Pizza. Like there's more. These are
all independent businesses. You're flagging.
Yeah,
so this feels rougher.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And this.
But you've got independent businesses here that can exist because it's affordable. I'm assuming.
Yeah. I think from what I've heard, that a lot of businesses who are in different neighborhoods, say Glebe or Westboro, have come to this neighborhood because it is more reasonable. I don't know if it's affordable, but it's more reasonable relatively. And there are all these condo buildings that have gone up with retail space underneath, so that sort of changed the character. But at the same time, the neighborhood is still central, it's still downtown, and we've always worked with our neighbors across the street at Center 507, which is an emergency drop-in center.
Okay.
So since we opened, we were donating surplus food to that center, and then when COVID happened and we became part of this Cooking for a Cause program, those sorts of connections became really valuable, and I felt like we were heading in a different direction with that, where we were kind of threading together different aspects of our cities, because to me that kind of work is hospitality. So we're professionals in that realm. I always felt like there was something that was missing there, and if hospitality organizations and social service organizations could find a way to work together, what could we accomplish together? And Cooking for a Cause was an example of that. And what I saw and what I heard was the most valuable is that people were accessing those services and now getting food from places like us and other great local businesses. Their health was improving, they were eating better food, and moreover, they were feeling like they were part of the city. They were seen and valued and not just continually pushed out. So now where we are, this sort of that rush to back to normal, which I always had issue with.
It's kind of like because normal wasn't that hot.
Wasn't really great.
Wasn't all that great.
Yeah. So we were moving backwards instead of trying to move forwards into something. So 507 has shifted into a 24/7 emergency drop-in center, which has had some dramatic impacts in the neighborhood because they've essentially become a catch-all for many of the shelters in the city. Because the city it's inadequate from that perspective as far as how people are being supported. So people who are vulnerable are ultimately coming across the street from us to access a center that's 24/7 because there are no others.
Right.
So that means there's a lot more people in the neighborhood that are vulnerable. So we're seeing more conflicts between, say, like the parents that are dropping off their kids at the public school across the street, and then them witnessing, a little encampment outside of our businesses in the morning. I had one interaction with one parent who was. There were a few people that were, outside of the diner because they get kicked out of 507 in the morning and they have nowhere to go. And this parent was extremely irate that they were there, that their child had to witness this.
Yeah.
And they were on the phone with the cops right away. And we started talking. I was asking them what was going on, and their immediate assumption was that we were on the same side.
Yes, of course.
Which... what I said to them was, well, why are you calling the cops? What are the cops going to do? Like, cops don't help these situations. It's not what the community needs is more policing. What we need is more hospitality, is more care. So Scott, who owns the
Owner
diner,
of the diner.
Yeah, we went out when the cops showed up to clear away these folks and their little encampment, and the cops obviously responding to this call with this irate mother came a little charged up and were, basically scolding these people for being there in front of a public school, exposing themselves to these children with their lifestyle because they've made these choices, and this was another thing I responded to this woman and said, it's not that black and white, and that's...
Did she hear you?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so, and I think
this is one of the interesting realities of main streets is they become these meeting places.
They
right?
do. They're intersections.
They're intersections. They're places of intersection.
Yeah.
And you're describing a neighborhood that has a social service institution, commercial enterprises, some chains, lots of independents, a school, a delivery service.
Yeah. There's tension.
There's tension.
And I think this, again, like that Cooking for a Cause program was a way that I felt was bringing us together. Enabling us to see one another differently and to feel connected, where now we're sort of back to where we were, if not even worse, where there's this sense of NIMBYism that's just, especially in this neighborhood now, because it's changed so much, because we have such a commercial vibrancy in the neighborhood now with an increase in folks that are marginalized and vulnerable and dealing with mental health and substance abuse disorders, that now that's coming face to face with everyone who's quote unquote getting on with their lives. And now it's just a sense of the othering, the pushing out, the wanting this just to be removed from the neighborhood seems to be stronger than ever. Whereas I felt that there was a time when we were making real progress to, instead of pushing people out, pulling them in and making them feel supported and threading this, fabric of community together. So what do we do? I don't know.
In terms of the way forward,
yes,
I think when you said that we're all having to become stewards of places now.
Yes.
I guess this is the interesting thing for me about should we be continuing to invest in main streets as the intersection? With that, I love that notion, the principle of hospitality. That if you're going to have a main street business, you have to be hospitality forward.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a social service business, or you're an accountancy, or you're a real estate firm, or you're a bank, or you're a cafe.
Yeah. Yeah. I often think if hospitality was a part of everything that we do, what would the world look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a simple principle, and I've listened to a lot of Indigenous folks talk about hospitality because it's so ingrained in so many Indigenous cultures. This exercise of generosity, and obviously we're all trapped in these systems where we have to produce capital, we have to make money, and to
But somehow you're finding a way to distribute your capital. You have a lot of capital.
Trying.
Social capital,
a lot of social capital for sure.
You're in the
social
capital business.
Is high here. The financial capital is a different story.
But your capital's attached to this place.
Yeah, for sure.
And
it's rooted in the neighborhood, and I've been approached several times by developers in different parts of the city who suggest to me that it would be great if we opened a second location and here, there, and everywhere. And I've been enticed by it. I've explored it, but I think I keep coming back here. I keep coming back to the corner. I keep coming back to this place, and I kept getting caught on this idea of how can I just expand from within? How can I be more present in this neighborhood? How can I grow with what I've got? And then when this space came available literally across our driveway, that made sense to me. It's just, I want to stay rooted in the neighborhood and see what's possible if you stay in place and commit to that.
We're going to release this report on the future of Ottawa's downtown, and I love the notion of growing within a place. How do you actually deepen your attachment to the place and grow within the place?
and keep people in it
Yeah.
instead of pushing them out.
Right.
So that's what I'm
invite
really
more
interested
people in.
And that's it. And we have this cutesy little motto called "This is your space," and we put the Y in parentheses. And to me, that came about very happenstance with a former staff member when I came back to this space, because I had stepped away for a while. When I came back, I had said to this person, because they're an artist and they did a lot of cool community creative events, and I said, I'm back here now, so if you want to do anything here, this is your space. And that's been an ethos that I've really gotten behind, and I think people have accepted that invitation. To me, that's what the parentheses stand for. It's an invitation. If you want this to be your space, then the door is open.
I mean, that's what the city is.
Yeah.
The city is your place.
That's it.
With the parenthesis around the Y.
Yeah.
That's what cities enable and have.
Yeah.
Right.
Invited in.
Invited in.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. I know it's a big day for you. You've got something opening today or whatever you've got.
Yeah, every day's a big day in different ways.
I can still taste that oat milk latte. There's another City Talk podcast in our Ottawa Session series with more conversation about how the actions that we recommend, some of them risky, are needed to improve the downtown for residents and visitors and for the country. You can read and see more about all of that at our improved website at citytalkcanada.ca. I'm Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute. Thanks for listening.